So how can a new democracy pursue civilian control of the military when it's perhaps following a military regime, as a new democracy in Burma will be faced with doing, or it is following an authoritarian regime, perhaps an authoritarian one-party regime that relied very heavily on the military and the intelligence apparatus for propping itself up in power. Well, the first step in what is, I would suggest, a rather logical sequence of escalating steps, the first step is to depoliticize the military by removing it from active involvement in government and politics. In many authoritarian regimes, the military has been in government. Serving uniformed military officers have held cabinet positions, executive leadership positions. Maybe they have been the government. So the key goal is to get them out of the government, out of politics, and even out of the defense ministry, because having a civilian defense minister shows civilian supremacy in this realm. Secondly, professionalize the military around its core mission of defending the country and its national security, and perhaps its involvement in a professional way in international security through regional alliances, through the deployment of international peacekeeping forces, whatever it might be. One of the perverse features of military rule is that the military as an institution is almost invariably weakened as a result of military rule, because the military drifts so far beyond its core mission for which it has professional qualification, namely the control of the means of violence, the defense of the country's borders, the maintenance of its security. What does the military know about health, about education, about public infrastructure, and so on? It may have a role in as a corps of engineers in building roads and bridges, but in managing the country's overall economic and developmental affairs, this is not the role of the military. And when the military assumes this, you often get a cleavage between the military as government, assuming all of these political and developmental functions, and often assuming as well handsome opportunities to accumulate illicit wealth in this way, and the military as military still performing these roles. So if you can unite the military around its core professional mission, that's an important step in the pursuit of civilian control. Third, get the military out of internal security, including the collection of domestic intelligence, which too easily drifts from collecting domestic intelligence on terrorists or organized criminal actors into collecting intelligence on the political opposition, which is completely unacceptable in any kind of genuine democracy. So the military should defend the national borders of the country. It should be involved in regional and international security. Obviously, if there's violent insurgency, a democratically elected government may need to call on the military to combat that. But with that caveat aside, the military should not be involved in maintaining internal order or gathering domestic intelligence. And if there's a need for more muscular riot control or maintenance of order beyond what the police per se can do, then there should be created some kind of gendarmerie or more muscular policing force that's capable of combating armed protests in a way that doesn't transcend this division between the external, outward-looking role of the military and the need to maintain internal order. Fourth, retire senior officers associated with the old order. In a few cases, if they're responsible or believed to be responsible for very grave violations of human rights or other economic or political crimes, they may need to be prosecuted if it is judged that they can be prosecuted without flipping the whole system into another military coup. But certainly over time, senior officers heavily associated with the old order can be gradually retired, given a nice pension, and accorded professional respect and status, while new officers come up who then will have a commitment to the new democratic regime because they've been promoted within it. And they then need to feel that they are appreciated and respected and have a very considerable, promising path of professional advancement and social standing within the existing order. And this means good pay, good benefits, high status, and not necessarily deference in terms of policy and politics, but respect in terms of their professional standing. Further on the agenda of sequences of steps to establish civilian control over the military. As you're retiring the old officers, new democratic leaders need to be advancing a new generation of military officers who are socialized into an ethos of civilian democratic control of the military. They accept it. They understand this is part of the constitutional order of a democracy and that it is not inconsistent with, in fact, may be highly consistent with and facilitative of a strong professional role for the military in a more limited range of functions and challenges. So this means further along getting the military out of control of its own corporations. Again, that's not the function of a military establishment. Establishing civilian control of the intelligence agencies and separating them from military involvement. And gradually subjecting the internal budget drafting, financial allocations, weapons acquisitions, equipment purchases, and strategic decisions of the military, subjecting all of this to civilian oversight. So the military, even in military and national security matters, is not a law unto itself, but its actions, its purchases, its policies, its strategy are ultimately accountable to civilian democratic control. This requires, as Alfred Stapon and other specialists on civil-military relations have argued, a politically led strategy in a democracy to manage the military and establish, forge effective civilian democratic control by elected leaders. So political leadership is required here because democratically elected leaders, particularly in the executive branch, but also in the legislature, have some tough choices to make and need to develop a very clear and effective political strategy. This should combine, as I've suggested, principle of civilian control, defense of human rights, accountability for previous crimes, with pragmatism in terms of weighing the balance of power and seeing how far can you go. It requires a deft sense of timing. When is there a moment when the military might be ready to consider new rules and new leaderships, might be ready to review the historical record, or when the society is so much rallied around this that the military has no choice to accept it. Timing depends on the relative power of Democrats versus the old order. And this is a judgment call that has to be made by elected Democratic leaders of when is the time ripe to pursue a more forward-leaning strategy of accountability and of establishing civilian control. We can offer a general proposition that the more negotiated the transition, or the more that the transition has been imposed from above, probably the greater need there will be for incrementalism in dealing with the military, establishing its responsibility for the past, and reorganizing civil-military relations in a way that asserts increasingly civilian democratic control. So the character of the transition will have a significant impact in determining the extent to which civilian democratic leaders can move energetically in these directions.